for the next 20 minutes, Judge Andrew-Napolitano joins us. He, of course, for the last week has now moved from the weekends with the #1 show in months. A lot of the Gates was #1 on Fox Business on the weekends to the regular Fox Business weeknights, and it's becoming very, very successful there as well. So from the weekends to weekdays, and hopefully very soon to the main Fox channel, because he's a real libertarian at heart, and we always appreciate having Judge Andrew Napolitano, judge-nap.com, also best-selling author, with us. Judge, this is a short segment. The long segment's coming up, but so much going on in the world today. What's most important on your radar?
I think the president wants to subjugate us, Alex. I think the president who falsely claims that he believes in civil liberties, who took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and who could stop all of this with a phone call to cousin Janet. We're not related, but I kiddingly referred to her that way, Janet Napolitano, has placed armed and unarmed, uniformed agents between private carriers and their customers at the most critical juncture, barking orders, demanding conformity, threatening arrest and fines. I think this is the beginning of an effort of this president to use powers from some source other than the Constitution, an argument his predecessor made, to get us to conform to his will. I fear that this TSA stormtrooper behavior is the tip of an iceberg or an ocean that this administration, now that it has lost some of its strength in Congress, may want to use to overwhelm us.
Well, we know, and you were critical of George Bush and the police state things he carried out. Obama's continued the torture, the wars, in some cases expanded some of the extraordinary rendition, the enhanced interrogations, but because he's got a leftist cover, the left has been in a coma dealing with it. But now this TSA, hands in pants, and we've got all of this happening. I mean, it really does show their lust to dominate us and to basically break those taboos. And you're right. They've announced they want TSA scanners on the streets. They're already beta testing it at train stations. TSA's been searching people's bags without warrants for years in New York. So you're right. I mean, this is something they want to roll out nationwide.
You know, the most specific part of the Constitution, the one that provides the most details as to what the government may and may not do, is the Fourth Amendment, which establishes the right to privacy, the right to be left alone. And it basically says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. In their persons, meaning their bodies. And the Supreme Court has ruled, in some cases with which you and I agree, and in some with which you and I disagree. Nevertheless, it has uniformly ruled that you own your body, and the government cannot touch it, or go near it, or go inside of it without an order from a judge after the judge has heard arguments from both sides and the government has proved its right to do so. Because the Constitution presumes that we are innocent until proven guilty, yet the TSA, not by a law that Congress wrote, but by a regulation written by a couple of faceless bureaucrats, nameless until a few weeks ago, has turned that presumption of innocence upside down and treats everyone as if they were entering a prison rather than getting onto a private airliner.
Absolutely, and expanding on that, they are having federally funded checkpoints that violate the Fourth Amendment, federally funded blood draws at DWI checkpoints, no refusal. They're trying to push forced inoculations. This is clearly their attempt to set the precedent to get in our space and put their hands on our body. And Ron Paul told me an hour and a half ago that they've grabbed his genitals.
I did not know that, and Ron was on with me last night. Ron made an argument which was purely Jeffersonian in its brilliance and its simplicity.
Well, tell us about that when we come back, Judge. I want to hear that, but I want to go further. I want to ask you as a judge, as a constitutional scholar, not just the Fourth Amendment. Am I wrong in saying this violates 9th and 10th? We've got a federal power grab that, even sworn peace officers of the state can't stick their hands down your pants without an emergency or a warrant. I mean, how are they doing this? We'll be right back with Judge Andrew Napolitano, judge-nap.com. I'm Alex Jones, Infowars.com. Napolitano, his show's now moved from Fox Business Weekends, #1, to Fox Business Weeknights. You can find out more on his website. He's going to have Jerome Corsi on tonight. We'll find out what's coming up on his show tonight. I love seeing Fox promote somebody like Napolitano because he tells the truth. He's a constitutionalist. He was against Bush when he was pushing tyranny. He's against Obama when he's pushing tyranny. He talks about the New World Order. If you just joined us, we were discussing the TSA in the last segment. You were getting into Ron Paul, who you interviewed last night, and his Jeffersonian argument against the TSA. Go ahead.
Well, Ron Paul made the same argument that Jefferson did, which is interestingly the same argument that the now iconic, heroic young man from San Diego made at the San Diego airport 2 weeks ago when he said, "Don't touch my junk," referring to his private parts. If I can't do it to you, then I can't give the government the power to do it to you. If you take a swing at me, I can take a swing back. But I can't invite you onto my property and presume the right to touch your private parts as a condition of your coming onto the property. Stated differently, the only powers the government has are the powers we give it. And the only powers we give it are the powers that we have to give it. We don't have the power to touch someone else in their private parts against their will, no matter what they're doing. It's a sexual assault, whether it's done by the gardener, by a school teacher, by a member of the clergy, or by somebody wearing a government uniform. Congressman Paul not only articulated that so nicely on my show, he introduced a piece of legislation that's 10 lines long, which would stop this in a heartbeat, but it will never see the light of day. Why do you think Speaker-designate John Boehner, who flies commercial from Cincinnati to Washington several days a week, was permitted to walk around the scanners and around the gropers? Is it because they recognize him? Well, of course they recognize him. It's because they want him on their side. You grope a member of Congress, he's going to vote against this. You let him walk around the gropers, he's going to say, "Oh, go ahead, keep us safe."
So this is true discrimination at its heart. But what about my point that this violates the 9th and 10th Amendment? I guess that goes to the Jeffersonian point.
The 10th Amendment says that the powers not given to the federal government are retained by the states and the people, and we never gave, the Constitution nowhere gave the federal government the power to keep us safe. That is the obligation of individuals and of the states. And the 9th Amendment says, just because we have enumerated certain rights in this Constitution, it doesn't mean that there are other natural rights that the people don't have. Stated differently, your right to bodily integrity, you have it whether it's mentioned in the Constitution or not. It's a natural right.
So, Judge, what is this attempt then? What do you think's behind this? They know brazenly ordering them to put their hands down the pants now and to record naked images of our body, which they've been caught doing. They know this is 180 degrees polar opposite of a liberty culture. It's a tyranny culture. So is this the Fuhrer precept that Bush tried, where they said, well, it's not illegal when the president does it. You know, torture's illegal, but it's not illegal if the president orders it. Is this just more of this control freak religion of pushing it to the limit?
It's more of the control freak progressive with an uppercase P religion that the government can do whatever it wants. Look, this morning there were 2 polls, very dismaying. One said 2/3 of the American public doesn't object to the porn or the grope. Well, most of the public doesn't fly every day, and they haven't exposed to this. But the more terrifying one is that 53% of Americans think the government is operating outside the Constitution and aren't doing anything about it. If the government is operating outside the Constitution, it's time to change the government. I mean, that's about as reckless a thing as you can be. The Constitution equals the rule of law. If the government is not obeying the rule of law, how can it impose laws upon us? The problem with the Boehner exception to the TSA, should they make an exception for Madonna or Derek Jeter or somebody else that's well known, is that these bureaucrats are making up rules on the spot and then making exceptions to the rules on the spot. That is a power that is not theirs to have. Only the Congress can make law, and it can only do it after a legitimate debate and a vote by the people's representatives.
So it's judge, jury, and executioner. I think the establishment's going to lose this fight. I mean, I really see this becoming a focal point of people's anger in general.
You know, I agree with you, Alex, and I've seen some people that I'm surprised to see on our side. Former Senator Rick Santorum, who almost always sided with big government, sounded like Alex Jones this morning. Peter King, Republican congressman from Long Island, who always sides with security, said the TSA has become the enemy of the American people. Congressman John Micah, who wrote the TSA legislation, says we have to change this immediately. I think this is starting to sink in across the board. It knows no ideological, no ethnic, no gender line. I think the American public is saying enough is enough. But one person isn't listening, and he could stop this with a phone call, and that's the president who wants to induce us to conform to his way of behaving and thinking, just like his predecessor.
That's Barack H. Obama, and they do want to back off now because they understand if they continue the fight, it's only going to have the American people come together, and that's what they're threatened by.